It is my great delight to be here with Pema Chödrön, as part of Sounds True's free series on resilience in challenging times. Pema, thank you so much. Thank you for your willingness to jump on the phone and talk to me as part of this series. Thank you.
Oh, thank you for inviting me, Tami.
Yeah, I think so many people are turning to you and your work, welcoming the unwelcome, comfortable with uncertainty, when things fall apart. Your book titles are almost, the phrases of our time.
I know. How did I know?
How did you know? Yeah, you were right there. You're ahead of your time.
I'm ahead of my time.
Yeah. Well, it's great to be with you again. I feel so fortunate. Here's where I wanted to start. I wanted to start with this notion of uncertainty, because I think for many people, there's a feeling that our level of, I would say, groundlessness, to use that word, is at an all-time high. When are my kids going to go back to school? Will there be a second return of the pandemic in the fall? Is my income reliable? I could go on and on and on. Massive uncertainty and a feeling of groundlessness. So I wanted to start our conversation. How can you help people feel anchored in some way, a sense of ground in the midst of groundlessness?
Yeah. Well, one way, this might sound sort of silly, but honestly I find it's extremely helpful, is to remain embodied. And by that I mean that you keep touching in with how you're feeling, just so that it's like self-reflection, but at the level of the physical body, just checking in with how you're feeling. And it seems like when you get panicked, afraid, anxiety level getting higher, which is, first of all, just a natural reaction to groundlessness and uncertainty and not knowing. But then there has to be some kind of way, well, as you say, how for people to stay anchored. So what I'm finding is that coming to the body and being embodied. So embodied and present and kind with whatever it is you're feeling. So in other words, obviously there's things that need to be taken care of, details that need to be taken care of. But just as you say, really what's going on here is there's no way to control this. You don't know what's going to happen. So the one thing that you can work with is your mind. And that's so crucial. So first of all, I would just say this thing about embodied, like coming back to how you're feeling in your body. Like, what does anxiety feel like? It's usually in the stomach, or for some people in the chest or in the shoulders, but just getting in touch with it, and then kind of like 3 conscious breaths, with the feeling, and a sense of sending a kindness or holding it with kindness. So that sense of self-kindness, self-warmth is so important, and to do it as embodied as you can. I mean, there's more I can say, but I like to have a conversation going back and forth with you,
Yeah, sure. Well, let's start with this being embodied during this time of great tumult, because I think an experience that I think a lot of people have when they turn to their embodied experience is that it doesn't feel safe in there. It feels all stirred up. There's a whirlwind and a swirling and a panicky kind of feeling. And okay, I can be there for 3 conscious breaths, but not much longer than that. And so how do we stay with that when it feels so, uncomfortable, but even more than uncomfortable, deeply disturbing?
Deeply disturbing, yeah. Well, I think the main thing, the main point really is to try it. What we do, right, is we get so caught up with our storylines, our panic storylines. which result in this churned up feeling. And every time we run with the storylines, which are futile, futile worries and storylines are futile in terms of uncertainty and really not being able to control what's going to happen. So then instead of disaster scenarios or just escape routes or whatever, to however you can be with yourself and relax with yourself. So I think one of the best ways is breathing in really deeply, and then when you breathe out, it's like the kind of feeling you get when you have a sigh of relief, And then you breathe in really deeply. It's the way I was taught it is you have a feeling of your lungs filling up, and then you breathe out with a sense of relief, or like that, like out, and then in, and I had to do it the other day. I was doing it consciously and kindly and as bravely as I could for like a good half hour before things calmed down and I was able to just be present with what I was feeling without that, I can't bear this, So I guess the message I'm trying to give is move closer rather than run away from.
Now, you mentioned to do it with kindness, do it kindly.
Yes.
What's the difference between doing it kindly and just breathing deeply in and breathing deeply out and, trying to get through it?
Yeah, trying to get through it. That's right. By the way, sense of humor is very, very helpful these days. And there is a lot on the internet that's great, that's making you laugh about what's going on. But so it's kind of atmospheric, I guess. It's a feeling of, and each person would probably have to do it pretty differently. I have found that the word kind can help people, like jumpstart people to work with it in their own personal way. But it's the feeling of holding it almost. Trungpa Rinpoche has this phrase, which is so beautiful, of placing the fearful mind in the cradle of loving kindness. So again, that's not how to, but do you also think, Tami, that sometimes words direct you in a certain direction? They don't really tell you how to, but each person finds their way to hold this in the cradle of loving kindness. Some way. Some people actually physically embrace themselves and rock, and other people, would find that very obnoxious to do. So they do more, maybe even an analytical meditation or something like that. But that's why I hesitate to be give too much of a technique, because of that, how personal it is for different people. But there is one thing I could say, and that is the compassionate abiding, which is a kind of precursor of Tonglen, which is that the feeling, if you breathe it in with the sense of breathing it into the heart, breathing it into the whole body, like breathing it in with the feeling of opening to it, and with kindness, with warmth, not with fear or hatred, but like some people use the language, what is it you need to tell me, or that kind of stuff, Anything that works. But breathing it in on the in-breath, that deep in-breath, and then sending out to yourself, and then you can include other people for sure. But to yourself, you send out, you send out that kindness, you send out that compassion, you send out that love, you send out that heartfelt appreciation, of this is tough and we're only human, and we can be kind to ourselves and to each other, and what else matters at a time like this than to be kind to ourselves and to each other.
So what I was going to say is that I do think words really matter, and when you offered that word cradle, the cradle of loving kindness, that word cradle made a big difference to me. And
Yeah.
now this practice you're offering us, compassionate abiding. Those words are very powerful too. I wonder if could we together right now do 1 or 2 minutes of compassionate abiding together? Ani Pema, can you just lead us through it? So that person who came on right now to the Resilience in Challenging Times page because they're suffering in some way.
Right.
And let's just compassionately abide together in whatever we might be experiencing. Could we do that? Could you take us through it?
Yeah, I can. And personally, I'm a person that with guided meditations, often I want the person to stop talking so that I can experience it. But maybe in this case, I will talk so that a person has some tools, I guess you want to use that word, to do it on their own. But I'll also leave some space. But so one thing is, excuse me for digressing here, but it's relevant, is maybe if you're really over the top with anxiety, maybe best to avoid the news for a couple of days anyway. Avoid, and the internet you may need for various reasons, and also there is humor on there, and also relating with friends is so helpful. But in terms of the news, anything that just gets you jangled, it could help a lot to go on a vacation from that for a little bit, just as if you just went to a beautiful place that didn't have internet so you couldn't listen to the news. And it's going to be the same in 3 days, so you could just relax a little bit around that in terms of causing yourself so much anguish. But okay, the feelings of panic are up for you, or the groundlessness feeling is up for you. And so ideally, you can do this out walking if that's helpful. For some people, to move is really, really almost essential in terms of crawling out of your skin, to go out. If you have the good fortune to have a park nearby or nature nearby or any way to get out in that and just walk, and you can do this walking or sitting or lying down, but you have the feeling that's usually pretty easy to acknowledge and contact. You don't have to call it anything. It's just what feeling scared or bad feels like in your body. So then you breathe in. You breathe it in. It's like breathing it in deeply. Like I often use the image of the heart getting bigger and bigger and bigger, as big as it needs to be to hold all of this. And sometimes I use the image when you breathe in, that you breathe into this big space, like the whole universe, the whole outer space around you and behind you and above you and below you and in front of you. But some sense of breathing into a big space, but some sense of giving it space, giving it warmth, and breathing it in as fully as you possibly can, and then breathing out like. So we could just try it for just a minute here, let's say. First contact the feeling, and maybe put your hand there. Put your hand wherever it is. Put your hand sort of gently there, and then breathing in. Sometimes maybe the heart feels very tight, and it's like trying to relax a muscle, So you just breathe in, and then relax, and breathe out like relief. And you could have a sense then when you're really breathing out of just a lot of space, a lot of relaxation, a lot of relief. But you could also send yourself, some people prefer, like on the out-breath, to just sort of send them something like that, the face of someone smiling at them that makes them feel better. Or the view from the top of a mountain where they were, or being on the beach looking out at the sea. Some people prefer that. Then you breathe in again, opening as much as you can. Each time you breathe in, it might be easier. Breathe out. Breathe in. Open, open. Embrace. Breathe out. Something like that. And for one thing, it slows you down. And, it's good if you aren't in a rush, if you have 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, to just do it. And as I say, or you can be out walking. Somehow it's easier out walking for me. I don't know. Then breathe out. And I just kind of leave it at that. What I find is people make it their own somehow. They make it their own. What do you think, Tami?
Oh, I think it's beautiful, the slowing down and the making space for what we're experiencing and then breathing out that relief. For me, when you did it, I saw the image of someone I love smiling at me, and that flooded me, actually, with some, a real softening experience. Now, Pema, one of the things I wanted you to connect for our listeners is a way that a practice like compassionate abiding could also help us feel connected to other people who are suffering. Because I think sometimes when we're suffering, when we're really afraid, we're in our own kind of contracted, pulled in little world. We don't feel our connection with others. And I know this is something you teach on so beautifully, how our places of pain and suffering could be a doorway to connection with other people.
That's right. Absolutely. It definitely is. It's where the empathy comes from, It's kind of the upside of difficult times is that it puts you in touch with other people being in the same boat. And if there's ever been a time where even if it's conceptual, just conceptual, that everyone in your building, everyone on your block, everyone in your town, almost everybody is feeling just like this, like you're feeling. And then also maybe you have people dying from this disease. Maybe you have people who have died from this disease. Maybe, that kind of sorrow. So then I said that compassionate abiding was like a precursor for Tonglen, which is the practice I think that you were referring to, right?
It could be Tonglen, or it could be a more kind of just everyday version of connecting whatever we're experiencing to other people. But I think it would be good, Pema, for the listeners who are new to Tonglen, who are hearing that word for the first time, if you could explain that and connect the dots for them about how compassionate abiding is a precursor to that practice. Yeah,
I'll explain that. Tonglen is, I believe, a Tibetan word that means taking in and sending out. So, if you've been doing the compassionate abiding, then you just take it another step. And sometimes this is, if you do it, say, for 10 minutes, 20 minutes around your own fear, with your own fear, then at the end, a good way to end is to let it be your link with what everybody else is going through. Not just in your country, but all over the world. And so when you're breathing in and you've been able to open that heart, then, and you're doing this, let's just say, for groundlessness, a feeling of groundlessness or fear, which are connected for sure. So you breathe in for that feeling, and you're opening your heart, and then you say, millions of people right now with this pandemic are feeling exactly like this. And you breathe it in. Since you're feeling it anyway, it's your doorway, it's your connection, your stepping stone for understanding what other people feel too. So as you're breathing it in, there's this sort of, like you say, this very feeling that I am feeling in my stomach, or I am feeling in my heart or in my throat, this very feeling, millions and millions of people are feeling this. And you breathe it in, say, may they also be able to open their hearts and embrace this. May they be free of suffering. And then you breathe out and you send out that sense of relief, that sense of your dear friend smiling at you, that sense of being able to slow down, and you breathe it out for everyone. And lately, I've been doing, since this is so much the whole earth, I've been visualizing your earth from the moon, and just breathing out for the whole earth, just sending out that sense of slowing down and relaxing, and that feeling of being able to embrace what you're feeling, sending that out to the whole earth, and then breathing in all the suffering, and breathing in your pain is the connection with other people's pain, and when you breathe out, your sense of relaxation is your connection with wanting other people to feel that sense of relaxation. So you do the same thing with the breath, in and out, but whatever you're feeling is sort of shared with everybody else. So there's that sense of empathetic, compassionate love and caring for each other at this time. And honestly, for me, this is what I'm doing a lot, because this is the most important thing for me. Is it gets me out of this, as you were saying, this contracted, all about me kind of panic, but what panic and fear does to all human beings, So it allows you, there's a lot of relief that comes from feeling love and care for other people, feeling concern for other people. But rather than it be abstract, just share what you're going through. When you breathe in with a sense of, may we all be free of suffering. And when you breathe out, may we all have love and caring and the feeling of interconnectedness in our life. May we all be there for each other, So empathy and love and caring on the in-breath and on the out-breath. So I can say a little more, but what would you say now about this?
That I think you're offering the quote-unquote good medicine we need in our time. That's what I would say. And I put good medicine in quotes because that's a way that we've just described Tonglen at Sounds True in a program that's about teaching people Tonglen. But I just think you're offering the good medicine that we need. That's what I would say.
Yeah. And see, and then if some people really have trouble with breath for various reasons, they have breathing problems, or trauma-related things can have sometimes trouble with breath also. So in terms of this, both things, compassionate abiding can just be a sense of, without the breath, sending love and care to yourself, and a sense of, people don't usually have too much trouble breathing out, like that. But anyway, it can be just a sense of sending compassion and love to yourself. And then in terms of other people, when you're starting to panic, you can just say, may I and all the other people on the earth be free from this. And then when anything nice happens, there's a lot of good, so much good happening now, And but let's just say in your personal life, a good cup of coffee, or something that makes you laugh that somebody sends you in your email, or just something beautiful that you see out your window, or when you're on a walk, or someone smiling at you. When there's anything good, you say, that makes you feel good, you say, may all the people that are going through what I'm going through here, may they feel, I like to share this with them. I have the feeling of wanting them also to feel this happiness, to feel this laughter bubbling up in me, to feel this sense of connectedness, or whatever it might be, or just the awe of suddenly seeing, today I looked out my window and there was this huge raven, just sitting on a branch, a snow-covered branch, by the way, right outside my window. I'm in Nova Scotia, so it's been getting to be spring, but today it snowed. So anyway, that kind of thing, is so awe. There's a lot of awe you feel, and then you think, oh, may all people, have this kind of goodness in their lives. So.
Ani Pema, I think this is so important, as I mentioned, because I think during the pandemic, there's a way with a mask on and keeping physical distance from other people, we can feel closed off. And, so much of the meditation training that you teach and other people teach is even referred to as a training in openness, being open. And yet we find ourselves, closed. And so you're talking about a way that we can feel connected with other people and yet be closed off to the germs at the same time.
Yeah,
it's an interesting posture, both having both be true.
That's right.
I wonder what you might have to say about that.
Yeah, well, it's interesting, we're all in quarantine here at the Abbey, so none of us are going out. We have one person who goes and does the shopping, and she's living in a retreat cabin, so she'll do it for a couple of weeks and then be in quarantine, and then someone else will do it and be in quarantine like that. So I haven't been anywhere. I do all of this kind of thing, just what I've been describing, but I've been talking to a lot of people, and for sure, the description of going out and people even starting to scream at you if you come anywhere near them, let alone, you can't go up and hug anyone. You can't, and everyone's in their masks and so forth. But someone was just telling me, but then they realized that person, all those people with the masks and gloves and stuff, were feeling just as cut off and isolated as they were, and wishing they could hug each other or say, get closer. And so you can just take that attitude of, having a sense of caring for them, being in the same boat you are. And so it becomes material for awakening your heart and opening to them and what they're going through, and opening to all the people really all over who are doing this, who are in the same situation. And then, the people that are, and there's this other thing, which is anger, and that is short-temperedness particularly. And I think of people who are already prone to violence, being all closed into a very small apartment or something like that, and whoa, how hard it must be. And but because I notice even in our very spacious situation that it's very easy for people to snap at each other, and then they apologize or something, but your nerves are kind of on edge. And so there's some sense of also working with your frustration and how anxiety makes you edgy and irritable and angry, and also kind of working with that in the same way, feeling it, owning it, and breathing out the relief. And so not in any way criticizing yourself for that, but just say, this is a human reaction to a very claustrophobic kind of situation, and may I be free of this particular suffering, may I not cause harm to other people, and when I do, may I say, oh, no, I'm really sorry, I'm just, so feeling so edgy. And people understand. They definitely understand. So I think it's a big part of being in the same boat is everyone has the same masks and gloves. And I was just talking to someone that was really angry at the fact that they were out in a park and there were all these people walking along together, chatting with no masks and no protection, and then they were getting close to them, and that kind of thing that is so makes people really go off, So you can do this kind of practice with that too, in mind. Just, yeah.
Ani Pema, I wanted to end with having you unpack a quote from your own work that I think is really useful right now for us to understand. And here it is, and we can go through it slowly. The first part: lean into the sharp points and fully experience them. Then, the essence of bravery is being without self-deception. Wisdom is inherent in emotions. So in this conversation, you've already, I think, spoken some to this notion of leaning into the sharp points and fully
definitely.
experience them. And you've offered us this practice of compassionate abiding.
Right.
And then you move on. The essence of bravery is being without self-deception. Can you explain that? How is that the essence of bravery?
Well, deception altogether is lying, lying. It's like deceiving another person is you lie to them in some way or other. And so self-deception is lying to yourself. And so it takes a lot of bravery to stop lying to yourself, because why in the world are you lying to yourself to begin with? It's because there's something under there, some truth that is very painful to actually fully acknowledge with kindness and love. And, it's something that you feel embarrassed about and ashamed about, like something you loathe, And so you lie to yourself, and it might manifest as arrogance or something like that. Or it manifests as aggression. But in some way, when you lie to yourself, when you're brave, it takes a lot of bravery to not lie to yourself, because there's something there. I'm just repeating myself here, but there's something there that you don't want to experience fully. And then, of course, that's when the idea is of leaning into it, So I said sharp points. That's a quote from Trungpa Rinpoche, actually. But just breathing in anything that's difficult, as in the practice of compassionate abiding. So to stop lying to yourself takes courage, and when you're willing to do it, or when circumstances kind of bring it out of you, something happens to you where you're suddenly willing to feel, then compassionate abiding can be very helpful to get you through that resistance. And so that as time goes on, you are more and more courageous and less into self-deception, or into less and less into lying to yourself.
Okay, so someone listening says, okay, I'm going to come forward and say the truth. I'm really afraid right now. I'm really concerned. And then the last line of the quote is, wisdom is inherent in emotions. I think that during this time when people are feeling so many challenging emotions, maybe more than they ever thought they would. If you had said to them, okay, I can handle it. But it's like, no, I'm on a roller coaster. I'm feeling a lot. They may not. What is the wisdom? What's the wisdom inherent in emotions?
Well, there's, a whole teaching on this in Tibetan Buddhism, that every emotion has its wisdom quality. Like every emotion is imbued with a wisdom quality. And but that takes a whole lot of teaching on that. But the basic message there is that the only place that you're going to find, let's just say, the wisdom of love, the wisdom of empathy, the wisdom of kindness, or the wisdom of an open mind and an open heart. The only place you're going to find that is in your emotions, being open, kind, embracing them. So I guess the real message there is, if you touch or allow yourself to be touched by what you're feeling, say by using compassionate abiding, then you will find that what becomes accessible to you is not by getting rid of these feelings, but by knowing them completely, intimately, as something felt in the heart, something that you can not run away from anymore, because it's as if the analogy that's often used is alchemy, that in the base metal, the alchemists were looking to find gold, not by getting rid of the metal and looking for gold elsewhere, but by going into the metal, they would find the gold there. That's the analogy. And the other analogy, which I always love, is if free-flowing water is an analogy for an open heart and an open mind, like flowing water. And ice is an analogy for when you get stuck, when emotions are running out of control. They like are controlling. Your basic goodness is being obscured by the emotions because they have such a power to send you on a rant, send you out of control. And so if the analogy for that is ice, then how you could understand wisdom and emotions is your practice becomes, your journey becomes knowing ice, really, really becoming intimate with ice. Because where else are you going to find the flowing water? You're not going to find it by throwing the ice cube away. You're going to find it by sending warmth, love, and kindness to the ice cube. It's kind of a funny analogy, but then it melts it, and the water is right there. So do you see what I'm saying? Like, it's inherent in, it's in the ice. So that's what I'm kind of getting at. But when I say the wisdom is in the emotions.
Mm-hmm. It's beautiful and helpful, yeah. And it leads me to, I think, a good note to end on with is this notion of having unconditional friendship, which is a phrase that you use in your teaching, towards ourselves. How we bring that warmth to the ice, and specifically to that person who maybe hasn't been a very good friend to themselves in some ways, but wants to be. And they're listening to this conversation, and they're ready to go back and befriend themselves, but maybe there's some, reconciliation that has to happen between them and themselves for that friendship, friendship to pick back up.
Right. Well, I would say that across the earth, one of the things that is the most prevalent is unfriendly to oneself, self-criticism. And if being friendly to oneself is kind of the basis of happiness, let's just say happiness, contentment, settled with your body and mind, a sense of okayness, then this friendliness is so, so important. And so how to do it, I think compassionate abiding is a way that you can train in that. But one of the things that's helpful to know, I think, and to keep in mind is that friendship is not just with the good parts. Friendship is with the whole person. So if you have a really, really close friend who's been a close friend for a long time, you love this person, and they love you, I guarantee that you have been through, they've seen the worst of you, and you have seen the worst of them, And maybe it even impacted the relationship negatively at one time, but somehow you've come through it together, and you two remain heart friends. You love each other, and you know each other completely. That's called unconditional love or unconditional friendship with yourself. And so the way you could have unconditional friendship with your friend, or let's just say you have a child who you love. You've always loved this child very dearly. And this child is a piece of work, This child has temper tantrums, and this child, when they're little, they do all kinds of things that are difficult. Maybe they're jealous, and maybe they are angry, but nevertheless, with all of that, and even what they go through as adolescence and addiction and all these things, your love from them never shifts. It's always there. And so that's the kind of love that's unconditional, not based on conditions of being one way or the other, So this kind of acceptance of yourself is what I'm talking about. Unconditional friendliness to oneself. That's what I'm talking about.
Ani Pema, I feel as I put my own hands to my heart and bow to you, I feel all the people listening, and I feel so many of them joining me in a feeling of gratitude and a bow to you. Thank you so much for coming on this call and offering such good teaching. Thank you.
You're welcome. And I bow back to you, Tami, and to all of these people, like mutual friendship with each other, mutual respect for each other.
Thanks, everyone, for listening. Sounds true. Waking up the world.